I want you to walk us through your 55-second fight.
Great. It's gonna be tough. I don't know if I can remember it all.
Yeah.
So there was three reminders that I made to myself mentally as I walked out. The first was establish distance, and I think that I did a pretty good job of that, considering that my opponent, every time he threw a big rear hand, a big powerful shot, whether it was an uppercut or a rear cross, I was just out of the way, and I was able to avoid it. Once he engaged 3 times very quickly, I realized that I was going to be able to time him moving forward. I also realized that my opponent had a relatively low lead hand. This is why I threw a few high kicks just to test to see where his hands were going to be. Then it came down to the second reminder, which was head movement. So I was constantly moving my head, also aiding me in being able to evade from distance. And then the third reminder was crouch and counter. As I was able to do that, I crouched after one of his punches, was able to counter by getting into a single leg. It could have been a punch, but instead I chose to get a single leg. I was close enough. Immediately latched onto the leg. He tried as best as he could to evade by moving away from me. I held onto the leg, climbed as close as I could to his hip because he ran into the ropes, couldn't go any further. Initially put the heel hook on. Opponent didn't react by turning, so I immediately went into outside Ashigurami and went for my finish. It still didn't feel too much of a defensive reaction, so I just went into the break until the tap, and that's pretty much how it went from my perspective. That's all I remember. But
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a lot of details.
Yes.
So, you kind of give us a little bit of your game plan in your little moments there, but did you game plan to go in exactly like that so fast, or,
No.
or was it a happy accident?
No, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it's an accident, but I wouldn't say that was the game plan to just like grab a hold of a single and submit him with a leg lock. The game plan was to not get hit more than my opponent, and potentially submit him if I'm able to take him down and get him to the ground. I mean, that's my real game plan. If I could use, it's a little bit more open-ended. I didn't have like one specific thing. I'm gonna armbar this guy. I'm gonna guillotine this guy. I have a lot of. I'm lucky to have a lot of facets of my game that allow me to finish an opponent. I can submit people. I think my stand-up's getting a lot better, and I can do damage there. But I'd say the two things that I'm most dangerous with are being able to submit somebody once I get them to the ground, and being able to do damage and striking when I get somebody to the ground. So that is always part of the game plan. So in a sense, yes, I was planning on taking my opponent down, but not necessarily, I wasn't in a rush to do it. What I noticed is that a great level of aggression from my opponent coming forward. Because of that aggression, I knew that I was going to be able to time that and go for the takedown, and that's why I think you saw such a quick takedown to submission. If he had been a little bit more tentative, I might have been more likely to strike with my opponent and try to play my own stand-up game before I decided to get a hold of a leg. Some of the best time to take someone down is when they're coming forward at you. The hardest time to take someone down is when they're trying to stick and move. They come in and then they move away from you. This is not really something that he was trying to do to me during this fight.
And you mentioned in your speech afterwards that this is a resurrection. Can you explain that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that there's been, for a long period of time, recently, I guess, I would say that in this era of mixed martial arts, there are a few fighters that go against this trend for sure, but where grappling is looked at as boring or ineffective or not as effective as some other things, it's specifically jiu-jitsu, I would say. I chose to use the word grappling because I think it's all-encompassing as opposed to just saying jiu-jitsu, because I think I add elements of wrestling and other, grappling martial arts, judo, etc. But I just use it as a blanket statement. But specifically jiu-jitsu in general, I don't think it's as effective as these other martial arts, just that and the other thing. It's not that important. And I just wanted to show people how effective it really can be. We have a very unique style at my team, a very submission-oriented style, something that brings to the table that I don't think there's very many fighters out there that have brought that to the table. There's very few that I can call on mentally that are true submission artists. A guy like Paul Harris, true submission artist. Guy goes out there, breaks somebody's leg. That's his plan, or arm, whatever it takes. But that's what he's out there to do, and he's out there to submit you. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu guys. You take like Damian Maia, for instance. It's beautiful what he does. He controls people and looks for the finish on the back. But I wouldn't necessarily call him a submission artist. I'd call him a control artist. Okay, he's exceptional at getting to the back, controlling his opponents, and I learn a lot from him. I want those aspects of the game as well. Same thing with Khabib. He's more of a control and damage artist, if you will. And that's how he uses grappling. I want to show people how to use grappling to put away opponents. And there has been some people in the past that have been able to do that, but I want to make a habit out of it. And that's what I mean by resurrecting grappling in mixed martial arts. I'm going to try to make it a point to show people just how effective jiu-jitsu can really be in mixed martial arts.
Given your basically given your record is still fresh, you're still undefeated, you got no scratches on you, into the fight very, very fast. What do you think is next for you now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very confident in One Championship's ability to continue to give me fights that challenge me and bring me to the next level. They did that with this fight. You know, my opponent does have a judo background. I was able to get in on the leg and very quickly bring things to the floor. I didn't give him a chance to counter, really. You know, I slid straight to the floor into an ashigarami. I took him out of his element. But so they presented a challenge to me. They presented me with an opponent that only has 4 losses, and they were all by decision. He's never been finished except for by me. And he hasn't lost since like 2015. So they put somebody very tough in front of me. I'm confident they'll do that again. And if they don't, and they choose to put me up for a title, even better. You know what I mean? That's what I'm looking for the future. Obviously looking to fight for that title. But I'm not going to be upset if that's not the next fight. I know it's coming. You can only be undefeated so long without fighting for a title. So, you know, I know as long as I do my job and I win decisively, and I'm an exciting fighter on and off the mat or in and out of the cage, however you want to look at it, I know that eventually that title is coming. So, you know, whenever they're ready to give it to me, or if they just give me the next step up an opponent, I'm happy with that as well.
So putting aside anyone that's in one right now, if you had a dream opponent that they could bring in just for you to fight, who would that be? Interesting.
So someone outside of one, they could bring Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie is also somebody who's I would look at as somewhat of a submission artist in grappling as well as mixed martial arts. And you know, I had a really tough match with him in ADCC that was very close, back and forth. He eventually submitted me at the very end with like 3 seconds left. It was a match that a lot of people really love to watch, and they always wanted to see the rematch in grappling, but I'm sure they would love to see it in MMA now that he's doing mixed martial arts. He's with the UFC now. It's probably highly unlikely, but it's just something that I would love to do, because it's kind of like one of those things where it's like a moment that I wish I could take back. Not that I don't regret it or anything like that, but it's just a moment where I wish I could like get another shot at that guy, because I think he's very, very good, and it would mean a lot to me for me to be able to beat him. So yeah, if somebody outside of one, that's who I would fight first, anyway.
Awesome. And everybody wants to know about Gordon. Do you know any update on when he's going to be fighting?
Yeah, so he came out here with us to Singapore, which is tough to do. It's tough to get Gordon to leave the U.S. He doesn't do it often. So he came out here partially for a seminar at Evolve. We did like a super seminar. Me, Gordon, Nikki, Danaher. It was an awesome seminar. I taught as much as I could. I obviously had a lot of obligations for fighting. We have one more day to teach tomorrow. But anyway, he also came out here to have some talks with the guys from One Championship, specifically Chatri. And I know that you know, they had some conversations. I think he talked to Matt Hume as well, who deals with some of the contract negotiations. And I'm pretty sure they're drawing something up for him. I don't know when that would start. He recently got injured. You know, I'm sure it's going to take him a while to get back on track, even in grappling. So it's going to be a while before we see him in a cage. I realistically don't believe that that's going to be until the following year at least. But I think it's very realistic to believe that sometime next year we could see Gordon Ryan inside the one cage. I do think it's a possibility. Don't know if it's definite. I can't give you guys, obviously I couldn't give you information even if I had it, but I don't think anything's, you know, nothing's signed on the dotted line or anything yet. But it's definitely, there's a potential for it. I know that I always rave about one. I always say good things about it. So I'll obviously be pushing him that direction. I think he'd be a good fit for One Championship, and I think they'd be lucky to have him. I think he'll be very exciting and also help in that quest, like I said, to bring grappling to the forefront of mixed martial arts again.
I'm really curious because you do have a lot of fans and you seem really confident, which I think is amazing, but I really want to know, how do you deal with challenges? Like basically when you are like training for a fight or, you know, just an average day of training?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that. I have a student of mine who I talk with often that has some anxiety issues. And I think everybody has anxiety issues, to be honest, whether they admit them or not. But this particular student, you know, expresses them more often than others, perhaps. And I'm thinking back to many moments where I had, anxiety attacks or panic attacks, as you could call them, and I have them with relative frequency around fighting. I remember the first time I got my hands wrapped for my very first fight. I just couldn't get control over my heart and my breathing, and it took me a while to really kind of get back into the moment. And last fight, I was on the bus on the way here, and I started watching tape of. I usually watch tape of very good mixed martial artists. I was watching Mike Tyson, and every time Mike Tyson knocked somebody out, I was picturing that as me, in my brain. And every time I watch that, I'm like, I was having a heart attack, and I'd flip to another highlight, and I'm like, I can't do this. I had to put my phone down, and I'm like, I breathe in, and I put my hands on the chair next to me, and I'm like, okay, it's all right. You're not getting hit by anybody right now. You can take a couple deep breaths, and eventually it was cool, but. Ultimately, the only way you can deal with these things is through preparation, in my mind. The anxiety that anyone feels towards a performance, and it doesn't have to be an athletic performance. There's plenty of people that have to perform for a job interview or a conference or a speech or all these different things that people can get anxious about because they're big moments in our lives. I think the most important thing is to develop habits, routine, and preparation that make you mentally and physically feel more comfortable when that moment comes. That's the best you can do. A lot of people talk about belief in oneself, but belief in oneself is an existential thing until you add in the things that I talked about before, which is preparation. When you talk about preparation, belief in oneself becomes natural. If I prepare for something, if I do everything that I can to simulate whatever it is that I'm about to do out there, it makes me feel more comfortable naturally. It's not even something that you have to think about. Your body is more ready for it. You could just take the physical, for instance. Physically, if I'm just in shape, I'm gonna feel better when I'm out there. In terms of technique, if my opponent was a southpaw, so by sparring more southpaws, it's going to make me feel more comfortable when I'm out there. If I sparred no southpaws and I just stood out there, and now I have a guy in front of me standing a completely different way than any of my training partners stood, that would freak me out, and it would cause anxiety, right? So those are just a few brief examples, but it's just things, as many things as you can control to prepare, to simulate whatever it is that you're going to go out and do, you should do. And habits as well. I was saying preparation, but also developing habits. It could be a particular food that you eat with relative consistency. Maybe you bring that along with you in your travels. I bring a lot of my own food with me when I go to travel, so I don't have to take a guess is this going to make me sick? Is this going to, now I'm not anxious so much when I'm eating. And it's just each of these little things make you feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more comfortable. And that's just the best that you can do in terms of building confidence. Everything else, any other confidence that you get outside of preparation, habits, all these things, to me is just delusion. Why be confident if you're not prepared? That doesn't make any sense. That's where my confidence comes from. I don't feel confident, me personally. I know some people that do, but I don't feel confident when I don't feel prepared for something. So that's the best that I personally do for myself. So that's the best way I could answer that question.
One thing I will say, if you need a second job, be a motivational speaker.
Thank you.
Absolutely.